Okay, for our last session for this class, we want to get into commercial insurance. This is not my favorite area. I've not worked for a company that has done commercial insurance, so it'll be a little bit textbooky, which is okay. Um, One thing I will say, a big part of commercial insurance, it's true for personal lines as well, but much more for commercial side, is this understanding of negligence and torts. We'll get into a few of these issues. You had business law class, which is a very important class, and you talk a lot about negligence and torts in those classes. Hopefully you're paying attention during that time. Those are very, very important concepts. But if it's been a while or you need a refresher, there's one of those online courses, one by Professor Frank Cross. I don't think it was as expensive as some of the others, where he does a very, very good review of business law related to negligence and torts, which is really probably the most important concept for those in the insurance area, because that's what they're insuring. The liability portion of these contracts is really focused on negligence and torts. We'll get into negligence and torts a little bit. What I'm not going to do is read the notes to you, so I'll let you read the notes yourself. I'm just going to keep my comments very high level. What should you know going into an interview or understanding these companies? And so the first thing is, just know the types of insurance. So we have commercial property. We'll talk a little bit about that. Business income loss coverage is a very unique coverage. In fact, this is a very big debate right now. You could actually, I gave you a link in the overview for these classes as far as a paper topic, which is the business loss income related to COVID-19. Confirms get a claim from an insurance company because of business disruption related to COVID-19. So that's a very interesting concept. Business loss. The next one, very unique to commercial insurance, is commercial boiler and machinery. This is coverage for very unique pieces of equipment that are very dangerous and have special loss control issues. Commercial crime is very important, especially because you have a business where a theft is possible, and especially because you have both employees and outsiders, and that creates special issues. Commercial inland marine, you do buy this when you have your personal insurance. If you're mailing something, you might buy insurance from the Postal Service. But it's very important from a business standpoint to understand, if you're sending packages, receiving packages, and it's a big part of your business, who pays for something if it gets lost or stolen or broken. And then commercial liability, we'll spend quite a bit of time on commercial liability. There's a lot of issues there, understanding negligence and torts. So we'll come back to that. I'll give you some examples, some interesting cases that I think are interesting. Some of you probably heard of before. So you can see there's quite a bit in the notes on that. We won't go through all of it. I'll let you read a lot of the notes here. There's a few articles we'll get into that are dated. I wish they would update them, but I can't find an updated one. What we'll spend a little bit of time on is two special issues. One is professional liability, like medical malpractice, and we'll talk a little bit about asbestos under commercial liability, but those are two big issues. There's a few other big issues here recently, and I'll talk about some of the ones I think might be big issues going forward. So that's all the commercial insurance. We will finish up with workers' comp, but that'll be a completely separate topic. So most of our packs with, they don't go out and buy a commercial property and buy a boiler and machine and buy a inland marine policy. They go to a broker, and that broker brings them a package policy that includes all of these coverages. It may be multiple insurance companies, but the insurance agent puts them all together into one big package. But if you look at the package, there's a page for each one of these. So these are very standard terms, and you see these coverages in almost all entities. There are some special coverages we will not cover, like farm insurance or pollution insurance or aviation insurance. There's some special things that apply to only certain companies. I'm ignoring those just because I don't have background with them, and they're not something you need to know unless you're specifically in those industries, and then you can read up about them. So let's just real quickly, probably the biggest issue here on some of these is just, what's the difference between this coverage and coverage you would get on a personal line. And so we're looking at commercial property. Commercial property is not very different than homeowners insurance. You can see the different types of policy forms, what's covered. You still have very similar where you're breaking buildings from personal property. The things not covered are very similar to what we saw in homeowners. Typical exclusions, very similar to homeowners. There is a special case for pollution. I know pollution, I worked with USAA and then with the real estate company building something at Lock and Terror. It was right over the Edwards Aquifer. Is a big issue. The last thing you want to do is build a parking lot over the aquifer, and you end up polluting the aquifer, and the cost of that is extremely high. So there's a lot of loss control here because the losses can be huge. But you can get special coverage for pollution, but it's a very tricky thing for some companies and a very dangerous risk. And then the co-insurance clause, very similar to what we have with homeowners insurance. It's slightly different on the way the deductible works, but most things are replacement value, and so for property, and then cash value for adjusted cash value for the personal property. So very similar, nothing unique there. Business income, very unique on the commercial side. Their coverage is your loss of income because of some peril that's covered, and your coverage is also for increased expenses. So if you have a school, so I used to work with a private school, and we had this business income loss. So if the school had caught on fire and we could no longer use the buildings, what this would cover is, first, we could rent space. We had looked at this. Rent space across the street. At the time, there was a strip mall with a lot of empty space. We could rent space across the way, so that would be the increased expenses. But we'd probably lose some of our students who would maybe take their students, the parents would probably take their students to another school, and so that'd be a reduction in income. And so those two things would be covered by the policy. What I told the school to do is don't assume if the school has a fire and you can't use the buildings, don't assume you can rent properties across the street. I encourage them to actually go and talk to whoever owned the property across the street and ask them, if something like this happened, how quickly could you get us up and running? So there's a lot of risk management here. The insurance provides money, provides help, but you're still responsible for the management of the risk. I'll let you read the rest of this. Just read through the notes. On commercial boiler machine, these are specialized coverages. I have in the notes that top 5 riders have over 70% of the market. I don't know if that's still true. That's a little bit of an old number, but it's still very concentrated. If you're an actuary and you got in this field, you'd be very, very specialized to do this type of insurance. You would be studying stuff other actuaries would not be studying. And it's essentially almost breakdown insurance, because when these things break down, they cause tremendous damage and tremendous loss. So it covers losses resulting from sudden and accidental breakdown of objects that are commercial boiler and machinery. Down here in number 6, you see a list of some of these things. Some of these things I don't know what they are. I know what a compressor is, the devulcanizer I'm not really sure. Mango rolls, refrigerating systems. So the private school that I worked with had a commercial and boiler machinery, and I asked the principal, what exactly does this cover? But we did have compressors. We did have some refrigerating systems. We didn't have much of those, so it didn't cover much. So it was a very inexpensive policy for us. So this cost covers the cost of repairing, replacing a property without deduction or depreciation. So it's extensive replacement cost. It may cover consequential damages such as spoilage of food. What's really unique about this coverage is it requires loss control, because this equipment, you want to make sure they're maintained, they're inspected, that the operators know what they're doing. You want to make sure there's loss control in place, and the company can actually suspend coverage if if the furnace or whatever it is, the kettle is not being properly controlled, inspected, taken care of, they have the right to cancel the policy until those things are fixed. So it's a good way. One thing I like about this insurance, dealing with some small entities, is that the insurance company helps you make sure you're not doing something stupid, that you're taking huge risks, especially with me working with a private school. I don't want something to blow up, and not only do we lose the equipment, but also cause damage to the children and teachers. And so I'm glad there's an insurance company coming in and saying, hey, if we're going to insure this, you've got to do these things to keep this thing operating and in good working order. Commercial crime is very unique because we have stuff that can be stolen. Obviously, your homeowner's policy covers theft, but with property coverage, crime is a separate policy because each entity is very, very different. Some entities don't sell anything. They're service industries like the school I work with. So commercial crime is very, very different there than, say, a major retailer that has a lot of products that they're selling. So you're protecting against theft, disappearance, and destruction. It doesn't exclude destruction that are for perils that are covered by commercial property, like fire and vandalism. So we're talking theft, disappearance, and destruction by outsiders. The policy may require that you have certain devices in place, so there is some loss control here. Dishonest act by employees is covered, but there's certain things the company has to do to make sure that if that happens, that first they get rid of, they fire that employee, that there's no more going on. This is not coverage for you do an inventory system and you have some inventory losses. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a theft. Forgery is covered. Alterations covered. Remember, those were covered in your homeowner's policy. Extortion, there are some special rules about ransom demands, and so you usually think one of your employees has been kidnapped, you call the FBI, but you're also going to call your insurance company because if you're going to pay that ransom, you want to know what's covered. It may seem terrible because you're worried about your employee, but you also think about the financial consequences. Computer fraud, money securities coverage is not excluded, but there's definitely going to be some limits here, just like we saw with homeowners, to make sure a firm is practicing good risk management. So very unique policy here that you don't see on, it's not a separate policy on their homeowners. It's just part of the homeowners. Then for inland marine, ocean marine insurance. If you go and read some of those old Shakespeare plays and other things, ocean inland marine is the oldest form of insurance, insuring cargo as it is shipped across oceans. Inland marine is grew out of ocean marine, and it's covering things not just over oceans but within countries. It's essentially cargo insurance, and so the key here is who bears the loss. So you might have point of origin, FOB for point of origin, FOB free on board, point of destination. So you're asking when does title pass? Does the seller still have title, or does the buyer have title? What point does it pass from one to the other? You want to make sure when title passes to you that you have insurance coverage for that, because things do get broken and lost. And now we're seeing people stealing stuff when it's off your front doorstep, when FedEx or UPS delivers something. So it is an issue to know when are you covered. Carriers themselves have exclusions, so you want to make sure you have insurance that covers those things that your carrier is not providing your coverage for. I know with me personally, when FedEx or UPS or Amazon have something that never got delivered, my experience so far is they just deliver it again with no questions asked. But if you're sending something expensive, I did have to send a painting to some friends in the Northeast, and I went to FedEx. I did buy the insurance. The shipping was over $100 and the insurance was about $90. The painting was worth about $500. So to ship it and insure it was almost half of what the paintings was worth. But I want to make sure, because it did have a glass frame And the lady at the FedEx, my word, she wrapped that thing so well, I was worried that the people on the other end would not be able to open it up. So you can see the different types of policies you can get. So yeah, you get this all the time. You hear about this all the time. If you buy stuff on credit card and other things, you may have some coverage for certain things. So, but on the commercial side, big industrial companies, obviously this is a much bigger issue. So we'll stop there, and then we're going to spend probably a couple of classes talking commercial liability. Some of this actually applies to, some of this applies to your homeowner's insurance, and maybe even your auto, because we're going to talk about negligence and tort, and those are things that your homeowners covers, but it's better to cover it on the commercial side because it's a bigger risk there. So next class we'll get into that.